Okay, so hi, I'm going to be talking about the other Boleyn girl, and then later on you'll see Cleveland, who will be talking about Anne of a Thousand Days. So the truth effect can be what makes or breaks a film. If it can't hold its accuracies, it's far too likely that the audience will discredit it and never revisit the film again. In order to avoid this, the director really needs to pay attention to things such as um, what truth claims are being made, as well as the visual, oral, chronological, and thematic accuracies throughout the film to make sure that they match with the time period that they're portraying. If they are abided by these accuracies, the film becomes more convincing and more enjoyable for the audience overall. So we are going to start with the truth claims. So the truth claims of the other Boleyn girl, basically at the very beginning, the beginning credits, it says that it's based on a novel by Philippa Gregory. Um, this is basically like an explicit truth claim, as it's stated that it is based off of this novel in the text in the beginning. We can assume that with everything that goes on, it's a historical nonfiction film. But there are also historical facts at the end of the film that can also act as the truth claim for the movie. And in that, it takes this historical info of what happened to the family, the Boleyn sisters' dad, their uncle, what happened to Mary, what happened to everyone after Anne's death, how the Church of England was changed by Henry VIII, and who Henry's heir was, which was Elizabeth, who went on to rule as the Queen of England. Visually, everything appeared appropriate for the time period, as far as my knowledge goes, at least. All of the outfits, hair, any of the settings to do with like the architecture, all the props, anything that would be in the background, everything appeared to be accurate for the time period. The only thing that I really noticed that I had a problem with was Henry VIII himself, the actor who was portraying him. Henry VIII is, at least from my knowledge, is known for his kind of having a larger frame and for being a redhead. Neither of those which the Henry and the other Boleyn girl abides by. He's more of an athletic build and he's brown headed. And his lack of being a redhead is also a problem of the other film as well. But other than that kind of thing, everything else seemed to be appropriate. Um, Audibly, everything seemed to be appropriate. There were all kinds of background sounds, which you would hope to expect from any kind of film. There, you could hear horses, footsteps, running. You could hear yelling, bells, or any other kind of background sounds that you would expect from like a town or market kind of area. All kinds of nature sounds. All the accents sounded genuine. Nothing that was noticeable in slip-ups to accents that weren't natural for them, or really any inaccuracies that I noticed. The music was appropriate for the time that I could tell, both with what time period instruments that I heard at the beginning, as well as the music for like the score music that you would hear in the background, even though the score music wouldn't be necessarily historically accurate to the time period. Nothing about it really stood out to be like to say that it didn't apply to the time period of the movie. Chronologically, the progression overall was accurate and appeared to go along naturally. The parts of the seasons that we saw seemed to fit appropriately. All the characters aged appropriately, particularly the children, since in that time period they'd be the ones that you would noticeably see aging occur. The rest of the characters, other than the children, even though it's kind of a couple years' time, there's not enough time to, especially with their age, to see a lot of noticeable aging. So really the only thing was that maybe Mary looked a little bit more mature over the years, but nothing like that would need to be significant for the older characters. Mary's pregnancy even went along chronologically accurate. You could see when she was pregnant, or when she found out she was pregnant, when she was pregnant, bedridden, and then eventually when she gave birth. But surprisingly, Anne's pregnancy did not go along chronologically accurately. It wasn't chronologically accurate. There was no indication that she was pregnant at any point in the movie. It wasn't even mentioned that she was potentially pregnant. It's just all of a sudden she was giving birth to Elizabeth, and that was the only indication that we even had, other than maybe prior knowledge that she was pregnant. But nothing running up to that moment told us that Anne was indeed pregnant until it happened. Come on, there we go. Thematic accuracy. All of these themes, like the ones that I'm touching on, marriage, women, power, they all kind of go hand in hand for the film and the time period. Marriage during this time was all about status. It didn't have to do with love, with what we think about modernly. Anne saw this thought of just being married off as being a good thing, whether in any form when she was potentially going to be with Henry, whether it be marrying her or in the beginning when she had the potential of being his mistress. She saw it as good and honor, a great rise in status for her and her family. Even if she was a mistress, she would have ended up as with like a duke or other high tier ranking. Mary had a more timid personality about the whole thing, but still she married and even became a mistress to Henry for the sake of her family over everything else. And even their brother, who protested the most in the movie about being married off for status sake, married for his family, even though he did protest against it and all of that. Women is another big one of this time of this time period. Women were sought to be obedient, pliant, quiet, qualities that Mary exhibited, and kind of flows into the accuracies of the time period. But Anne went against these certain things that they often look for. I'm unsure if Anne was actually this outspoken and bold like she is portrayed in both of the movies, really. But it's definitely uncharacteristic for the time period, for most of the time period. It's more of a modern idea to be, for a woman to be outspoken and bold like she was in the films. There's also the big theme of power of the movie, and seemed to be portrayed accurately through all the layers. The church was the main power of government until Henry decided to alter the Church of England to get his way and gaining that power back for himself. Anne even displays her want for power by persuading the king to be with her instead of her sister Mary, even though Mary was just then giving birth to a son, something that he had been wanting for such a long time, and the reason why he went through all these different changes with the church and everything and gaining all this power just to have a son. However, that power was eventually revoked when she never gave birth to a son, and she even went as far as to potentially commit incest with her brother in order to give him a son, and eventually she was executed for that. Many of these themes and everything that I talked about will again be revisited for Anne of a Thousand Days, which Cleveland will be talking about next.